Welcome to the Bleep Bulimia podcast with guest Dr. Kari Anderson, author of Food, Body, and Love. Hi, everyone. I am Lorianne. I am the host of Bleep Bulimia, and today I am so excited to have Dr. Kari Anderson on, and she is the author of Food, Body, and Love, but the greatest of these is love. She's also been treating eating disorders for 32 years and now has her own practice. And thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thank you so much, Lorianne, for having me. I just love to come in and share my passion about treating eating disorders, and especially those with binge eating issues, whether it be somebody that purges or whether they don't. The binge eating brings up a lot of shame, and I want to melt that because there's a reason why we do that.
I love it. And I'm looking forward to hearing that. So my first question is, how did you end up in this area of helping people with eating disorders?
Well, I have my own story, and it starts when I was 8 years old. And my story is that I remember a time that was very dark in my childhood, where my mother and I were very, very close when I was younger. And then she fell into a very deep depression and just was not available to me anymore. And we had just moved. She had lost both of her parents within a 2-year period in their early 50s. So this is, my mom was very young when she lost her parents. She was orphaned. And so she was just catatonic. And I felt like I didn't have safety anymore. At the same time, there was some, and this is so common thread for everybody, is that there's some sort of fear-based anxiety or trauma or something going on. And that was happening for me at the same time. I didn't feel protected. And so therefore, I started eating sugar. I figured out that if I just ate plain sugar, and I stole, these sugar packets. My dad owned a restaurant at the time, and I would go down and be his little helper. And I went and stole these sugar packets, and I would go into the women's restroom and lock the door, and I would just pour straight sugar down my throat. And somehow I knew I felt better and I was going to be okay. So I created this neural pathway in my mind and my brain that anytime I felt frightened, alone, despondent, that if I just ate sugar, that I would feel better. And that neural pathway, just it continues to this day. I don't respond to it. I go, oh, hi. I understand what you want me to do, brain, but I'm not going to do that right now because I have some other things I can do to calm down. But at the time, it lasted for quite some time, which led to a full-blown eating disorder by the time that I was about 14, 15 years old. And that was because I started dieting. So here I am, somebody that is using food to comfort. Now I'm concerned about my body. And I'm feeling like I need to do something about it. So I started dieting. And the same story I hear over and over. I was a Weight Watcher girl in the 70s, and I was really good at Weight Watchers. And I'd mark everything. They didn't have apps back then, but I had check boxes on a sheet. And at that time, I lasted until I couldn't anymore. And then I started binging, and I started binging really badly. And I ended up having actually binge eating disorder, which we had no idea what that was back then. I just thought I was out of control. I called myself one hot mess, and of a teenager, and I had that eating disorder until I got treatment in my late 20s. After that, it led me to be what we call a wounded healer, and went back to school and got my master's, and then later my doctorate, and been working in eating disorder field ever since.
Wow. It's actually funny, we have somewhat of a parallel there because, and I'm going to get emotional. It's a full moon, I think. My mother lost her mother at 48, her father at 59. So at their age, she was only 21 when her mother passed, and then she was only 26 when her father passed. So same thing, she went into a depression as well. But I was not born yet. Then she got pregnant with me, and that helped her get out of it. But I think there was always still that's a painful thing to go through, like very painful. And I wanted to just quickly ask, I know that this is sort of off topic, but how did your father deal with it? My dad had to get a nurse in to watch my mom.
Well, she was a teacher, so she took a year off of teaching. She did get some ECT, some electroconvulsive shock therapy, and that was pretty controversial back then. I know that they do it a lot now. But I think it just had to, the thing that's interesting, because when I wrote my memoir, Food, Body, and Love, which is both a memoir and also a self-help how-to, but I learned a lot more about my mom, and she started talking about, because I subscribe to a trauma-based or trauma-informed therapy style called polyvagal theory. And basically it talks about the nervous system and what happens to the nervous system and what we do and how we respond to it in order to survive and to feel better. And she started exercising. Interestingly, when somebody falls into a collapse, which would be a freeze, right? We hear about fight, flight, and freeze. Freeze is when we kind of like, we collapse, we get depressed, we hide. Essentially, the only way back up, what we call this nervous system ladder to a place of functionality, is through movement.
Oh.
And she found and she learned, and this is something that I never knew. I just resented her because I thought she was like making a comment on a pudgy daughter that didn't exercise, right? And yet she was just in survival mode, and she started exercising. She started riding her bike around the block and around the block and around the block, and started jogging and whatnot. And that actually helped her pull her out of that depression, and she got on with her life. And so now I understand the nervous system, and I understand why she did that. Now, she didn't do it in a way, or compulsively in a way, that she did it in a survival way. So she never had an eating disorder. She was always very small, right, and very petite, very different from me. And so when that also pushed a lot of my body image buttons. An exercising tiny mother. So because I was built more like my father. But anyway, so that's how she was able to move through that. Mm-hmm.
So you were saying that she mentioned something about pudgy little daughter. So she made comments to you like that?
Oh, that was just all in my head. The thing is that
Okay.
Our perception is very real, and it's our own truth, and it's our narrative and our story. But I think I inflated it as I wrote this book, and my mother in her 80s. I saw it very differently, and we had a lot of good conversations. And one of the things that was quite healing for me is that she said, I always just thought of you of being like me, and I realize now that you're very different. And so I'm sorry that I wanted you to exercise and be like me. Well, interestingly, I became an athlete, and I love exercise, but at the time I was quite rebellious against it. In fact, as soon as she went out to exercise, I would just go to the refrigerator and start eating. So there was that mother-daughter push-pull that was going on. But
I can totally get that.
It's like it's kind of F you. Bleep you,
Exactly.
bleep you, right?
Speak French. No, I don't want to speak French. I'll speak French with my sister. I'll speak French with my teachers, but with my mom, I didn't want to. And that was, it was exactly that. It was painful to do. Why though? No idea. No idea.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it's a common theme because a lot of my clients also had a little bit of push-pull with their mothers too.
Yeah.
So.
Well, my daughter did too. And actually she still does, even if she's like 29. It's okay. You get used to it. So your book, let's talk about your book, Food, Body, and Love. So what inspired you to write it? Tell us a little bit about it. It sounds beautiful.
Yeah. Well, what inspired me to write is I felt like it's like after 30 years of working in this industry of eating disorder recovery, I really came full circle and with a real understanding. In fact, kind of like the clouds parted and I go, oh, and I was able to see exactly why I did what I did and why I used food and how it turned into an eating disorder. I mean, sure, I've been treating eating disorders a long time. We have lots of evidence-based treatment. We have, we think we understand it, but for me, there was a profound awakening, kind of a full circle, is that I totally get it. And I get it, and I want to share that with everybody else that's struggling, so that they don't feel bad about themselves. Because I really thought it was about an emotional problem. But the more I studied neuroscience and biology, there is a huge biochemical process that's going on in my body, and my body was compelled to binge. And so I wanted to share that this is not your fault. There's something going on. We can correct it. And it's not because you're all psychologically messed up. And that's why I wrote it, because I'm bringing in a science piece to this. And the reason why I call it Food, Body, and Love is that there is actually a state in our physiology, a love state that we were meant to in our design. And I am a believer in terms of, I have a faith. I believe that God created us to be in a state of love, and that when we get into a state of fear, things it causes problems, havoc in our lives. And so there is actually a physiological state of love where we are connected to other people and we are co-regulating each other. And that's the best state to be in. And that's where our best selves come out. Okay, that's who we are. But when we fall into a state of fear, we get into fight, flight, or a collapse, which would be a freeze. And so I'm looking at us and the eating issues from a perspective of the body and the physiology of it. And
I
so,
love that because,
yeah,
sorry.
and so love is the state that we're all looking for. And that's what we're striving for. And so it's really a state without fear. And so that's everything that I do in terms of I have a new workbook that's coming out, and that is a companion to my Food, Body, and Love book. And it's coming out in the next couple months. And what it does is it really takes people through step by step. How do you get your body into a state of love? And a lot of it just has to do with getting ourselves into a calm state, using a lot of mindfulness techniques, but also there's some processes in terms of our thinking, our mindset, that can help us. For instance, of a heart for gratitude, a focus on gratitude can actually change our physiology and our brain to be more in a state of love and to look for those things that make us feel good rather than a fear state. And so there are things that we can do in terms of from mindfulness meditation to learning how to calm the body down, for instance, and yoga or other types of movement activities, and even the things that we eat can help calm our body down into a state of love rather than a state of fear. I really do believe that inflammatory foods or things that we eat, that the body is just in a state of fear. When we get our knees hurt, our stomach hurts, when we eat in a manner that pulls our body into the state of fear and goes, what the heck? What are you doing to me? Right. And so learning to befriend our bodies and say, oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. Let's get ourselves calmed down. So it's really a befriending process. And so it's got lots of things like that. So that's what the book's all about.
Beautiful. So that, like, to me, what you're saying too, that a lot of that has to do with self-love as well. Because I know that when you put too much of your, which I used to, too much of who I was on what I thought other people thought, and the love of others towards me, that's when I broke down. And like you, I had gained weight, and then I went on a diet and everything. Because you're denying yourself what you went to, and then you go back to it. Like it doesn't work. But I found when I learned to love myself, and that was helpful with my sister. The things that other people thought about me were less important, and it was more about, how am I going to better myself rather than what people think about me. I used to always think that if somebody was whispering, they were talking about me. Now I don't feel that way anymore. But I would imagine that that's the level that you want to go to, because that's a fear. People talking bad about you, people not loving you. Those are part of the fears that we go through, right?
Right. So I talk about trying to find your people in terms of those are the people that you spend time with, that you feel better about yourself having spent time with them. And there are people though that you spend time with, or things you do, maybe on social media, things that you do that having spent time with those people, you feel worse about yourself. And so I talk about, we want to move toward and spend time with those people that bring out the best in us and not bring out the fear and the doubt in us. And so really, in terms of, that's a lot about boundaries and making some intentional choices as to who it is that we're going to spend the most time with. Obviously, sometimes we can't divorce our families. And if they're not toxic or, abusive, obviously we would just learn how to either get our needs met. And if they can't meet those needs, then just spend less time with them.
I fully agree, and make that choice to spend less time with them. It's healthier for you.
Yeah, it is.
Yes, because I don't think that there's many families that are not a circus, as I heard before. And so, yeah, there's some people that if at the end of every time you're with them, there's arguments or whatever, and you don't like conflict, just be there for them, but
we just need to love them, because they're, we always go into these relationships thinking that people need to change. And I think that we can ask for our needs to be met, right? They may or may not be able to do that. So we just love them, right? And no, that's just my, that's just my uncle, or that's just my boss, or whoever it is and rather than allow them to disrupt my nervous state, I'm not going to let myself get dysregulated over this person. You become kind of a scientist and observer of these individuals and go, they're quite interesting, but it's not about me. And so learning these kind of techniques to try to preserve and keep ourselves, because in the type of therapy I do, the number one thing for us to do is to pay attention to our nervous system and try to keep ourselves in a state of calm, or what I call a state of love. And so that's our main goal, is get calmed down.
Funny,
because I'm living my best life now, and not letting myself stay in these states that cause disruption. And so I'm always looking to collaborate and work with my body so that we're collaborative team. My body and I are in our best self and our best state.
And I agree with that too, because I actually started talking to my body parts, sitting there going exactly like you. I got to know my body and going, I'm sorry, like you were saying.
Exactly.
And I wanted to mention that very quickly too, and I think I've mentioned in a previous podcast, but my sister-in-law, I am divorced, but I never divorced her. Right. Unfortunately, she's passed, but I could like a lot of people, like she was about 400 pounds and then she lost and she went down to 185. But and I was bulimic, but I said, I can actually relate to you. I said, the only difference between you and me is people can't see that I'm a binge eater and they can see it in you.
Yes.
I hid it behind that. It was hidden, but I could relate to her more than somebody who was, eating normally. Like, I'm going to get you. I got it. I understood her.
Yeah, you can't tell by looking at somebody's body as to what's going on with their eating disorder.
No,
You really can't. Unfortunately, those that have larger bodies, and I've been much larger than I am now, before, but I'm the same person. So, but unfortunately, I dealt with a lot of weight bias, and teasing and problem. I mean, and bias in the medical community as well, in terms of the way that I was viewed. But
well, my
you know, so
ex-husband, sorry, but my ex-husband didn't even tell me he had a sister. And he said he was bullied. He was bullied as a child because his sister was overweight. So he basically cut all that off. And I would imagine that that must have caused her pain too. Because if I had a sibling that did that, that would be hurtful. So these are things that, unfortunately, she didn't get the help that she needed to be able to really understand that she was a beautiful person. She just never, and she really was, her heart was right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so many people fight their bodies and hate their bodies. But, the thing is that the longest and most enduring relationship that we will ever have is with our body, from the time that we were, born, and to the time that we depart. We're with this body. It's the longest relationship. And so I always say that being mad, hating, separating from, dissociating from your body is not going to help us. I mean, we have to deal with our body. And so I really help people to take a neutral approach. So you don't have to love your body, right? But we have to have a mutual cooperative type of relationship, and to be and to look at your body from a compassionate view, from a perspective that what must my body be going through and what it's trying to do for me. Because I'm telling you, they're fascinating. The more I learn about the science of the body, the more fascinated I am in terms of how hard it works, to stay well and to stay alive.
Very, very true.
Yeah. And so that kind of brings me back to, I wanted to make a comment about when we go on diets, what happens. And or if somebody else has controlled our food. There's something that's very a thread that runs through all eating disorders, and I believe that to be food insecurity. And what that is obviously true food insecurity, and from a social justice perspective would be that the community, or we wouldn't have enough food. But when I work with the individuals that have what we call loss of control eating or binge eating, there's always a thread someplace of they either didn't have enough food, they had a bunch of brothers that ate all the food before they could get to it, they either somebody tried to control their food, like mom controlled the kitchen and you couldn't eat between meals and whatnot, or somebody put them on a diet early on in their life, or they chose to go into starvation diets. Every one of them has what we call food insecurity. See, the thing is we know there's a Costco down the street. Our brain does not know that. Our brain thinks that we could starve. And anytime that we start to mess and not feed ourselves enough, the body will overcompensate, and it will change our biochemistry. It will change everything to crave more food, to eat more food, and to ultimately binge on it. And so we have to calm that food insecurity down, whether it be psychological or physiological. Whatever we're doing, we have to say, I am going to feed you. I'm going to consistently feed you, and I'm going to nourish you, and I'm going to take care of you. And so we do this entire paradigm shift, is that food is not the enemy, food is the healer. And because we're going to calm the body down and remind it that we're going to be okay. You don't have to fight for survival. And so that's part of the process. So it's working with and getting a good relationship with food as a healer, right? As medicine, getting a great relationship with your body, and trying to move ourselves into that state of love. And that's really about relationship. Our relationship with self, our relationship with our body, with food and others.
So I know that you also have a program, and we were talking earlier, and I was saying for my listeners, very affordable, which, a lot of times as people who are looking for ways to recover, you don't, because it's too expensive, but beautiful. And I was looking at your website. So if you can please tell our listeners a little bit more about that.
Sure. Yeah. And I did that actually because there are people that can afford me. Right. And I don't see that many clients. I only see between 15 and 20 clients a week. And it's not like a revolving door in my program, but I had more people reach out to me and say, and I do coaching and counseling, but I have people reach out to me and say, I can't afford you, Kari. What do I do? And that is why I created, first of all, I wrote the book. Two, I created an online course by the same name, Food, Body, and Love. And I have a workbook that's coming out in the next couple months. We've only got advanced reader copies right now. It's going through review, but those will be out soon. But the online course I am going to offer to your listeners for half off the normal rate. And I think it's affordable even without half off the normal rate. But the online course is an 8 session or module program. Some people do it in 8 weeks, and some people take a lot more time. And it's video driven of me. I do the program, and then it has all the assignments that you can upload, and I can interact with you. There's a community you can interact with, and email me, and I will email you back and try to give you encouragement and whatnot. And so the coupon code for 50% off is RW50. RW50. And so you would go in and create a username and a password, and you get into the course. And then if you choose to purchase it, when you're purchasing, you make sure you put the coupon code in, and it would be only $99. It's normally $199, but you get $100 off.
That's beautiful. That is, like I said, amazingly affordable and worthwhile. So listeners, if there's anyone out there listening and saying, I want to start somewhere, and Dr. Kari, for listeners who aren't watching this on YouTube, can't see her, but she's just a lovely lady. And I can just tell with your heart, you put tears in my eyes. I am very grateful for you working so hard with people with eating disorders. And like you said, at the very beginning, when they started, now it would be 42 years ago. That's scary to say when I started. There was some stuff on anorexia, but really nothing on bulimia and binge eating. So it's nice that we've progressed. And I know that this is not just gender specific. It is men, women, anybody. Like, this is something that we go through. So how can they find you, Dr. Kari?
My website is really easy. It's myeatingdoctor.com. So MY eating, EATING, doctor spelled out, DOCTOR.com. So it's a really memorable, easy to find me. I've got lots of resources on there. I'm a blogger. I blog for Psychology Today, but I post everything on my website. Of course, I do groups too, which is another real affordable way to work with me, and all kinds of stuff on the website that might be helpful to you.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time to share this. And your book is available, I would imagine, on your website. Is it also on Amazon?
It actually is only on Amazon. I don't have, can't purchase on my website. What is that? I can't remember what that is, but it goes to Amazon. It's $19.99. on Amazon, and you can find it on Amazon. There's links from my website to Amazon as
Okay.
well. Mhm.
Perfect. That's great. Okay. Well, thank you again so much for being here. And hopefully we'll get you back on at some point. If you have any other books that come out, please let me know. I'd love to have you back. And I
Okay.
appreciate your time. I really do. Thank you for
Thank
being
you
here.
so much. Thanks for having me.
Take care.
Mhm.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Be sure to visit me at bleepbulimia.com.